I want to talk to you about benefits of knowing God. Because knowing God has got benefits. Being a son, being a daughter of God has got benefits. In the book of Psalms 103, the Bible says, "Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me, bless his holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits. Who forgiveth all thy iniquities, who healeth all thy diseases, who redeemeth thy life from destruction, who crowneth thee with loving kindness." Knowing God. And when I'm talking about knowing God, I'm talking about having that close intimacy with Him and knowing Him as who He is. Remember when He met Moses in the wilderness? Moses had not met God before. And when he started talking to Moses, Moses asked him, "Who are you?" "Will I tell the Israelites you are?" He tells him, "I am whom I am." And in this, or rather by this, God is telling Moses, "You cannot contain me in a box. Go tell them I'll visit them according to their needs." And so there is a need of knowing God. And when you know God, there are benefits that you draw from knowing God. The psalmist says, "Forget not the benefits of God." And I want to give you, in a few minutes, just 3 benefits of knowing God. Number 1, the Bible in the book of Daniel, chapter number 11, verse number 32, the Bible says that them that know their God will be strong and do exploits. Allow me take you there. Benefit number 1, when you know God, you become strong and do exploits. 32 says, "And such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flatteries. But the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits." The benefit number 1 that you draw from knowing God, you become strong in faith. You become strong in spirit. As people of God, God has called us to represent Him, to serve Him. I tell people, God, as mighty as He is, the creator of the earth and the heaven, and the Bible says He created these things from nothing. God being such a mighty God, He cannot do anything on the earth without using a man. And for God to use you in the level that He would want to use you, for God to use you to do exploits, you need to be strong in faith. You need to be strong in spirit. Remember, Jesus said, "The things that I do, those who believe me," I'm just paraphrasing this, "they will do greater things." For you to do greater things than Jesus did. And when you are talking about greater things, I'm not talking just about, church things like, praying for people to receive miracles. I'm not talking about, preaching the gospel and the thousands or millions of people coming to Christ. And that is part of it. But even doing great things in the business world, for you to do exploits, You can only do that when you know Him who has called you. When you know God well. What do I mean? As you get into that business and you face challenges, when you know God, you know that it is not by your power, it is not by your strength, but there is God who is doing it for you. This reminds me, in the Bible, there is a time a governor called Zerubbabel. Israelites had returned from captivity, and God told them to build the temple. And the Bible says when they rose and started building the temple, there was opposition. The Samaritans rose against them. They opposed them. And God sent a word to his servant Zerubbabel through prophet Zechariah. And he told him, God tells Zerubbabel, the mountains that are before him, I will level them. And the Bible says God told him, tell Zerubbabel, it is not by power, it is not by mighty, but it is by the Spirit of the Lord. Now, when you know God, as you face life, you are so strong, you are so confident that I'm making it. I'm looking for people. I'm looking for, sons and daughters of God who stand and represent God on the earth so powerfully. And that one can only happen when you know God, because you draw the benefit of being strong in spirit, strong in faith. Jesus said, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, then you tell mountains to be removed from your way and be casted into the sea. But let me tell you, you can only talk to a mountain. You can only talk to a situation that looks like a mountain before you when you know God who works miracles, that He is able. As you speak, you know Him, you know that He is faithful. He is going to follow that word and bring it to pass. So, number one, when you seek to know God, one of the things that you receive, and this is what I'm calling benefit, one of the things that you receive is you receive inner strength to confront issues. Number two, benefit number two, it gives you courage to face life or confront the enemy. Knowing God gives you courage. When you seek God and you know Him, Paul says, I know Him whom I have believed. When you know God, when you know what He is able to do, when you understand how faithful He is, you receive courage. You receive courage such that when you are faced by challenges, when the enemy raises against you, when opposition in that business comes your way, you have courage. You are courageous. You will not, stop doing what you ought to do. So, knowing God built courage in us. An example is the case of David in the book of 1 Samuel, chapter number 17, verse number 32. David comes to the battlefield, and when he arrives, Goliath raises against the army of Israel, and he challenged them. And the Bible says for 40 days and 40 nights, Goliath was challenging the army of Saul and telling them, give me a man. And they would run away scared. But David came to the battlefield, and David knew his God. And this is what David told the king, verse number 32. And David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. David is a young man. And he comes to the battlefield. And there were soldiers who are experienced in war. Soldiers of the army of Saul. But these soldiers, their problem was they never knew their God. They never knew the God of Israel as a God who fights for them. But David, and we know David, you know, and in case you don't know him, David was a friend of God. For you to know God, you've got to be a friend of God. You've got to cultivate, an intimacy with him. You've got to deliberately create time to fellowship with him in prayer and in worship. And David in the wilderness was, taking time to worship God. And he had intimacy with God. He had an encounter with God. We see him telling King Saul that there is time that the lion came to take sheep, and I rose against it in the name of the Lord, and I destroyed it. He had an encounter with God. He tells him there is a time that a bear came and wanted to kill a sheep, and I rose against it in the name of the Lord, and I destroyed it. So David had an encounter with God. You can never know God, and you can never, build courage in you unless you are a man, a woman who has an encounter with God. And this is my prayer for you, that as you continue in this journey of life, every day you'll have an encounter with God. When you encounter God in that problem, maybe it is a financial problem, and you pray and God, it intervenes and provides for you. It may be on the 11th hour, but he comes through for you. You have an encounter with God, so you know that God is able to provide. That one builds courage in you. That even if I go through difficult, financial situations, I know there is a God who is my provider. He is able to supply unto my needs according to his riches in glory. And so David comes to the battlefield, and every other soldier is running away from this guy called Goliath, because he was an experienced man in war. But David had courage. When others were running away, he confronted the enemy. Let me tell you, friends, life needs people who are full of courage. The way situations are, the way, the economy is in the world, it is only a courageous man who go to his bank account and get money and invests in a business, in a new venture. It takes courage. And let me tell you, for you to be successful, if there is something that you need courage. The other day, I attended a school, meeting, and we were talking to students. And there is this colleague of mine, and she was challenging the students, and she was telling them, you can never be successful if you want always to try those simple things. You have got to be a man, you have got to be a woman who takes up those challenging issues, things that are challenging, things that are hard. And for you to be able to raise and venture into a new venture that you have never been, you need courage. Life is a journey. Life, I tell people, and more so those young men, young women who are getting to marriage, I tell them marriage, is a jungle that you have never been before. It's a mystery. And for you to get married, for you to raise up and, against a lady, a man, you've got to have that courage that I know that I'll make it. Even though I've never been this way before, but I know I'll make it. It takes courage. So when other soldiers were running away, David told King Saul, let no man's heart, faint. I'm going to fight this man. And David rose up and he fought Goliath. And when he killed Goliath, he became famous. Some of you, God has called you, and greatness awaits you, but you will never be great unless you're a man, unless you're a woman full of courage. And how do you get courageous? How do you build courage in you? The way is to know that God is a God who will never leave you, who will never forsake you. And as you walk in this journey of life, God is there to undertake for you. Benefit number 3, as I bring this to a conclusion. When you understand God, you are able to address Him accordingly and represent Him well before man. Exodus 3:13. The Bible says Moses challenged God and he asked him, I want to know you, because the people that you are sending me to, they don't know you, and they will ask me questions. They will ask me, who has sent you? And so God told Moses, when they ask you that question, tell them, I am has sent you. And Moses went to Egypt and he represented God. He acted on his behalf. Friends, the other day Jesus said, we occupy until He comes. We cannot occupy and talk about Him, stand in His position, unless we know Him. And when we get to know Him, we have, we are packaged. We are packaged to represent Him and represent Him effectively. I'm talking about the benefits of knowing God. Benefit number 1, you become strong in faith. The inner man becomes so strong that you cannot be shaken. Benefit number 2, you become courageous in life. Sometimes life is very scary. It needs men, it needs women full of courage. And when you get closer to God, when you get to know Him, you become courageous. Even in giving, Abraham gave his son because he was courageous. He said, I know God is able to resurrect him, so I'll give him. You cannot be a man, a woman who is a giver unless you have that courage. You cannot do exploits unless you have courage. The last benefit I've said, you are able to represent God and represent Him effectively. How I pray for you that in this journey of faith, day after day, God will continue revealing Himself to you that you may know Him. For people who know their God will be strong and do exploits. God bless you. Amen.